Guys, so I just want to start off with saying sorry this video took so long to get out. As you can probably see, it's like an hour long. There's a lot of video sorting and sifting through the footage and everything just on my own time. So yeah, it took a long time to do. With that being said, this video is not intended to be something that somebody watches through all the way. It's intended for people that are currently doing the build or interested in the build, and they're looking for information on specific aspects of the build. So, for example, like if you want to know how I ran the fuel system or what I did for the belt drive, you can just go to those sections and look at that instead of watching an entire hour and hoping that I cover it. With that said, also, like let's say for like the cooling one, I'm not going to show exactly how I did the cooling thing because I didn't videotape myself doing it. For like the heat exchanger, VMP already has videos on how to do that. So a lot of this, like the specific parts and how to install them, there's already videos on how to do that online. So I didn't videotape that, but I do tell you what I used and how I used it and stuff like that. So hopefully that's enough to get most people by. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. I monitor my channel a little bit, and I should be able to get back to people within a couple days. So yeah, enjoy. All right, what's up? So this is gonna be hopefully the comprehensive video. Not hopefully. This is the comprehensive video that I'm gonna put out for the Predator GT500 swap. Um, the rest of my series was just kind of while I was doing it, and I admit that they were all like single takes, probably not the best videos, especially if you're looking for information quickly. But this is going to be like one video for everything. Um, my experiences, what's good, what's bad, and yeah, just one big video. So and I'll put timestamps in for when I talk about different things, probably like my experiences and then how to do it so that there's different sections. Because I'm going to start off with my experiences because I think that's kind of relevant. Assuming you haven't seen the rest of the videos, which is perfectly fine, this is my 2013 Mustang. Completely stock Gen 1 Coyote, other than um, it's got the boundary oil pump gears and boundary crank sprocket, and then a one-piece drive shaft. And I have the American Racing 1 7/8" long tube headers and catted X pipe. Really, that only matters for boost levels. But other than that, really, it's stock for as far as this is concerned. Um, and I bought the blower last October, so this has been a build for roughly about 6 working months, probably. Everything more or less went together pretty well, other than the blower. Pretty much, so like the heat exchanger, the pump, pretty much the entire coolant system is done by VMP. The tuning was done by VMP. Um, the booster pump was done by VMP, and the belt drive is done by VMP. Pretty much all the significant components other than the head unit itself have been done by VMP. So you'll get very accustomed with VMP, and they have all the like weird external parts that you're gonna need for this build. And I will say on the parts front, VMP is pretty good. Their wiring harnesses are great. I had no issue with their wiring harnesses. They're pretty much top notch, no soldering. Um, I like in a couple of my videos, I did have like the heat exchanger wiring was kind of weird when it comes up by the fuse box, but that was kind of fixed on my end. So that was, I think, I will say it's 70% me, probably. I'm just not doing it right.
So other than that, like all of their wiring has been perfect. Um, their pump has been good. Heat exchanger's been as good as I can tell. The fans on it have been great. What else? Yeah, I mean, I don't have any, like the parts front, I don't have any issue with. Tuning front, I've been kind of disappointed. So when I went, this car was full bolt on before this, so I had the headers and an 18 manifold in the cold air and just kind of, pretty much run of the mill full bolt on. Um, and it was tuned through VMP then as well. Uh, Through an extraneous circumstance I don't need to explain, but um, and that one was like that tuning experience was okay. Um, for me, like that was my first tuning experience. I didn't have any problem with it. Granted, the setup was very simple, and so I went with them again because I figured, I already have a reputation with them. I've already spent $3,000-4,000 with them. I might as well. Hopefully, they'll give a crap. Um, and I just like for me, on my perspective, it didn't seem like they really cared. I mean, I guess I had a couple of issues with them. This is probably going to be going on the sixth tuning revision by the time we're done. Two of those tunes have been just completely wrong. Well, one of them was completely wrong. One of them it was killing boost halfway through due to a load limit, from what I can tell. Um, and there's just been periods now where I'll usually turn around in a day, especially since they're 3 hours ahead of me and I have work, so I'm not going to really be able to converse with them more than once a day. Um, I'll turn around in a day with like whatever they need. So if they want a watt log or any sort of data log, I'll go out and I'll grab it and I'll email it to them. Um, and then there's been numerous times now where I've had to wait over a week to get a response from that, and not even a hey, I'm out of the office. I'll get back to you sometime around this or whatever. Just complete silence for like a week, and then hoping that they'll get back to me. Which, I understand, and especially now because they're really busy. But like for a $700 tune, it did not seem like they really cared. There's plenty of times where I'm trying to ask questions like, "Hey, do you think it was this?" Because we were running into some issues with this, and they just never answered any questions. Also, they're the reason I'm stuck with four pulleys, because when I bought the Predator swap kit for this car, I worked with a sales rep. I don't remember their name, and I won't say their name anyways. Um, that the experience towards the end was less than ideal, um, because they ended up shipping me a 3.4-inch pulley, and on VMP's own website, they recommend a 3.5 for this car because even a 3.5 is pushing the limit of what this car can handle on 93 octane, plus possibly octane booster. So they gave me a 3.4 right off the bat. I emailed them. I'm like, hey, your own website says I shouldn't be using this pulley. I get an email back saying, you're fine, run it. And so on my own, I'm like, yeah, you're kind of full of it. So I went out and I bought a 3.5, and I had them tune it with that. And so that was with the sales rep. So I went to the tuner. I was like, hey, do you think the 3.5 is all right for this car? And I never really got an answer. And so I found a 3.6 because that was the biggest they made. I was like, screw it, I need to go as big as possible because like 3.5, according to my calculations, was over 10 psi for where I'm at. And so I was like, all right, I gotta buy a 3.6. And so I went out and bought a 3.6. So assuming that these pulleys, I think, were like $150 a piece, I'm in at almost $500 in pulleys. And so we ended up having it tuned on the 3.5. Just because the difference between the 3.5 and the 3.6 boost wise is pretty much nothing. I mean, you're talking about a tenth of an inch in diameter. So we had it tuned on the 3.5, and it was going into knocking issues because I'm pushing over 10 psi of boost on 92 octane Oregon gas. So it was knocking, and tuner told me to put some octane booster in it, so I put some octanium in, and the knock went away. So I did probably 5 wide open throttle pulls with this thing detonating at over 10 psi. But I'm not really happy with the fact that, I mean, I do understand that, like, when you supercharge, you do kind of take that risk into your own hands, but, like, they did not care whatsoever. On, like, I asked them multiple times, you know, what's a good boost level, what's a safe, I want to be as safe as possible. And they just never really responded to that at all. So I'm not happy on that front at all. Like I said, I'm going on, I think, a week and a half from me sending in a data log for hopefully what will be the final tune, and I've heard zero from them. So, and I'm not here to just bash them to bash them. I'm just saying that, like, for somebody that spent close to probably about $3,000-4,000 with them, and, like, I'm tuned through them, so my car's lifeline is in their hands. I would not get tuned through them again. I know there's a Facebook group. I heard that at least one other guy with this car, with the same car, has been tuned through Lund. I'd probably go with Lund from what I've heard. Yeah, VMP was just very not. I would not spend $700 for this tune again. Not ever. All right, so let's get into how to build it. We'll start off with the easy stuff. So actually, no, we'll start off with the hard stuff because that's really what's going to make or break it for you. The hardest thing by far for this swap is getting this supercharger on the Coyote physically. And the reason being, well, not the reason being, but it's going to differ from generation to generation. So the Gen 1, the 11 through 14 Coyotes, the only thing you have to do to get this blower to fit is there's 2 locating holes on the passenger side. There's dowels, so male dowel pins on the bottom of the supercharger that need to fit into female locating holes on the head of the engine. And I believe the male dowel pins on the supercharger are about 100 thou or 0.1 of an inch bigger than the holes on the head. So what I ended up doing was I just took some drill bits. Obviously, you want to tape over your intake ports, and I just drilled the holes out. So, and I tried to engineer some dowel pins that I could press into the supercharger that would step down to the stock size on the heads, and it wasn't worth it. It was way too much work versus just drilling out the 2 little locating holes on the head. And if you need to in the future, just put some sleeves in the locating holes on the head to step it back down to stock size. And so I just took a drill bit, and I think I went up 3 bit sizes, just slowly. It's an aluminum head, so you really don't have to try that hard to drill them out. Just very slowly drill them out, check it with a pair of calipers, drill it out again, check it with a pair of calipers. And I did that I took a piece of square tubing and I put it in my drill press, and I took the drill size that I wanted to use, and I drilled straight through the square tubing, and then I took that square tubing and I put it on the head deck of the engine, and I used a handheld drill and drilled through it. And so what that did was, by using the drill press, I knew that hole through the square tubing was square to the face of the tubing, and so when I put it on the head, it would make me drill straight up and down. And so I did that for 1 bit size, and then measured it, and then stepped up another bit size, took that piece of tubing to the drill press, drilled, kind of oversized the hole, or re-drilled the hole so it got a little bit bigger, and then repeated the process. And I think I'm about 10 thou clearance, or 10,000th bigger in diameter than the locating pins on the supercharger. So it does have a little bit of clearance, but that's how it is stock for the stock manifold to the stock locating holes on the head. Yeah, and so after you drill the holes out, the supercharger will sit right on. Um, and so the locating bolts for the supercharger are going to be, I believe they're M6 by 1. So thread pitch is M6 by 1. And you're going to need 8 of them, I believe. Just look at your supercharger. I believe it's 8. And those go around the outside. There are some discussion. So also on the topic of mounting are the fuel rail bolts. Those are also M6 by 1, but they're going to have to be studs. So, and I believe they're 180 millimeters long, and you can get them on Amazon. You can get a pack of 5 for like $10 or $20. Stainless steel, because you're going into aluminum. Stainless steel for everything if you can. Yeah, just do stainless steel for all of your fasteners. And so the thread that I was talking about, or the topic of discussion I was talking about, was there is some concern that these superchargers, the fuel rail bolts don't go all the way through. And as far as I've seen, the only models that the holes don't go all the way through is like a batch of like 300 superchargers that the manufacturer messed up on. All of the, it's like if you buy this from Shelby Auctions where it's off a real car, it should have the through holes because that's how they're mounted normally, from what I know. So between the, let's say, 8 M6 by 1 bolts that bolt straight to your head, now you have the 4 studs, and those go up top. They go through the whole thing. I ran the studs down, and then actually, at least from my Gen 1 car, the plastic little rails that your heater hoses sit on from your stock car also work on this. I believe they're flipped around, if I remember correctly, so driver's side is now on passenger and passenger side is now on driver, but it still works for this. So you put your fuel rail down, and then you put the little plastic thing down, and then I did a washer and a lock nut, and you're good to go, and it works perfectly. And that is mounting for the supercharger. Just talking about modifications to the supercharger, really the only modifications that you have to do are, the only one you have to do is you have to tap the back of the lid for an intake air temperature sensor. This should come in the Predator swap kit, or you can just buy it yourself. I believe the 11 through 14 cars, from what I have seen, need the little plastic, the black plastic Ford Lightning sensor, and then I think 15 and up use the brass intake air temp sensor. That would be a VMP question, but that's from what I've seen at least. So you tap the back. I have the back passenger corner is tapped, and because that's where the old map sensor was at. So you can pretty much just drill and tap right where that's at, and it works perfectly. And then if you want to, either if you have a pressure regulated fuel system, or if you're like me and you just want to see what your boost is at, you can tap for a boost port. I've seen a number of places that you can do this. The one that I've seen the most and the one that I've done is on the driver's side, right on the flat side. Just drill and tap, and you're good to go. And since this lid is aluminum, it's pretty easy to drill and tap. I would ask me how I know, but I would drill and tap both at the same time because pulling this lid sucks. Again, ask me how I know. So that's for, okay, so we did the intake air temp sensor and the boost reference. And that should be all the supercharger modification you need. Unless you have to drill out the fuel rail bolts, which just spec a drill bit to the size of that hole and drill straight through. It should be a through hole, so you're not going to hit anything if you drill straight down. Okay, let's go on to belt drive. So This is running the VMP no grind front engine accessory drive kit. I'm currently running a 6 rib. Uh, and so pretty run of the mill. I had no issue with this kit. I did end up, so when you're looking at the boomerang bracket or like their little bracket, I did end up replacing the top idler bolt with a longer bolt just because the thread engagement on the one they gave was not to my liking. Um, but other than that, it went together pretty well, and the belt drive's pretty nice. I haven't had any real issues with it. When I was running my 3.5-inch belt, it was, or not, sorry, when I was running my 3.5-inch pulley, I was using a 69 and 1/8 inch 6 rib belt. It was a green belt, and no matter what I could do, I could not get that thing to stop squeaking. Um, and it just sounded like crap. Like I'd go to car shows and I'd fire it up when I'm leaving, and it sounded like crap every time, and it sucked. This one with my custom pulley, it's a 4-inch pulley. Speaking of that, actually, I'll do that right now. I'll have a link down below to the Facebook group where hopefully they've accepted my post on this. But I did post a thing with the step file for this pulley. It's an 8-rib, 4-inch pulley that will fit your 6-bolt hub. It's an 8-rib. Of course, I'm running a 6-rib belt. Obviously, the 6-rib belt will work on an 8-rib pulley. You just use the back 6 ribs. I only made it 8 ribs just in case, for whatever reason, I want to go 8 ribs for, whatever reason I can do that. And so it's pretty much VMP's 3.6-inch pulley. I took all the measurements off that, along with Gates Belt Company, their diagram for the little ribs, and exploded it up to 4 inches, and then created that step file. You should be able to take that to pretty much any machine shop, and they should be able to make that pulley for you. This one is made out of 6061 aluminum. There's no surface treatment, no anodizing, no knurling, definitely no grip tech or anything like that. And I've had no slippage, no squeaking, no nothing. It's 4-inch. It's a 4-inch pulley. I doubt you're gonna have belt slip with it. And yeah, it works. It works great. Works just as good as all the other pulleys I've used. And at wide open throttle, it will make I think it was just under 8 psi. If I kept in it, it would probably make 8 psi, which is great because that should be pretty safe for Gen 1 Coyotes. Especially for me, it's a 91 or 92 pump gas. I had no detonation, no knocking, and 8 psi is plenty for what I want. And yeah, so it's free on the Facebook page. I figured I'd make it free just because, I mean, the amount of guys that are going to want this pulley in the first place, it's not even worth selling it for any sort of price. And trust me, getting it machined is going to cost enough in its own. So it's free there. Shouldn't be anything special about it. This one fit right on just like it was a VMP pulley. There shouldn't be any issues with mounting it. I do believe the 6 bolts on the face of it are off just a little, but I didn't have any issue mounting it, and it should be good. And it should work with both idler pulleys on the boomerang bracket as well. It should clear pretty much everything there. It is kind of a tight fit, but you still have enough clearance around it that I'm not worried about anything. And it works great. I call it the dinner plate because it's a 4-inch pulley and it's massive. But it keeps everything safe, and I have no issues with it. And nothing else special about the belt drive. The idlers they gave me were great. I haven't had any issue with that. The tensioner they gave me was great. It's a very strong tensioner. I don't have any issues with belt slip even when I was on a 3.5, and I would trust it down to a relatively small belt, especially with the boomerang bracket and the belt wrap. I don't think that there's really any need to go up from a 6 rib setup, uh, unless you're running probably in the twos for belts or pulley sizing. I am running an ATI balancer, just the stock size, no overdrive, nothing like that, and it runs great. I retain my the front belt, because the back the Fiat bracket, the Fiat kit is the back belt drive. So especially like on this car, stock, it's a stretch belt on your back drive. So the belt drive closest to the engine was just a straight little belt that went from the crank pulley to the AC compressor, and that's it. And then the front drive ran your power steering and your alternator. No, sorry, not your power steering. It ran your alternator and your water pump, and that was it. So now the front drive's the same belt path, same everything. It's still running the alternator and the water pump. The back drive has been converted from a stretch belt to a belt system with a tensioner, and so it runs from your crank pulley up over the tensioner, down below your AC compressor, and then up over an idler on pretty much the top of your right underneath your valve cover, and then up through the boomerang bracket, over your supercharger snout, down through the boomerang bracket, and then over your crank pulley. And it works great, especially because I hate that, not that the stretch belt whenever went out, but now both belt drives have a tensioner, so I can just pull them without doing any stupid tricks for that stretch belt. And yeah, it's been no issues there other than swapping out that one top bolt on the boomerang bracket. It went together great. No really any concerns there. As for pulling the hub off of, or pulling the pulley off of the supercharger, because you have to pull the stock pulley off and then put VMP's 6-bolt hub on there. If you plan on changing the pulley size at all, if you plan on running the stock pulley, which I believe is in the range of a 3.2 inch pulley, I believe. If you're Gen 2 and up, you should be able to run that. Gen 1, I would very, very not recommend you do that unless it's a built motor. Yeah, so pulling the stock pulley off and putting the hub on, there weren't really any issues with that. As long as you have a vise and you buy VMP's little tool, and really, I mean, if you had I think it was like if you had a chunk of steel and you had a drill bit, you could make the tool yourself. It's nothing special, but it pretty much just holds the 3 prongs in place while you zip off the Allen key for the pulley, and then you pull it off, and you put the hub on, and everything's great. The hub's great quality. I don't have any issue with it. I do appreciate being able to change out pulleys really quickly, and as my tuner said, pretty much, I mean, I didn't know this, but you can swap pulleys all you want on the tune, and you don't have to get it retuned. So I can go all the way from my 4-inch to the 3.4, and I shouldn't need a new tune. It should just accommodate from there. So for 6 bolts, I mean, you'd have to replace the belt if you go a super long ways in pulley sizes. But for 6 bolts, you can change it out pretty easily. So that's pretty nice. But that was pretty straightforward, swapping out that hub. No issues there. There was one question that I came across, and that is pulling the snout assembly off of the supercharger. Some of I believe it's the newer ones, have a seal, like an actual felt seal between the assembly and the supercharger. And I have not been able to find that seal for sale, but I know that the older ones, and the one that I did, use anaerobic sealant instead of a seal. So if you can't find the actual like felt seal to replace, just go to an O'Reilly's or really any parts store, and they should have anaerobic sealant. and you just put that around the base and slide it in, and you're good to go. There's no issue there. Also, getting that assembly off, the VMP video made it look easier than at least mine was. Pull the 4 bolts, and I believe it's your like 10 o'clock position if you're looking at it. There's a good spot for you to get in behind the snout assembly and pry towards you, and that really helped pulling it out. So if it's really stuck, there should be some like a little vantage point from like your 10 o'clock position that you can get and pry away from you / pull the thing towards you, and that helped me out a lot. We'll go into coolant. Coolant will be next, or the cooling system will be next. So this is not really anything special. I am running a VMP triple pass heat exchanger. It's down here. It mounts right in front of your radiator on the crash bar, and so I got the triple pass heat exchanger, and it runs up to the head unit, and my reservoir is right here. This is a Canton, Canton Racing coolant reservoir. It was initially designed for 05 through 09 Mustangs as a replacement for your standard cooling reservoir, just a relocation for Paxton kits. But I bought it and I repurposed it for this coolant system. And to do that, you do have to weld on another 3/4 heater hose bung, because you have to have an inlet and an outlet, not just an outlet like this bottle has. Other than that, it works great. And then VMP's Bosch pump, which is right underneath the passenger or the driver's side headlight, mounts there with the Z bracket, and nothing really scoff at there. So the routing path that I have is, if we start at the coolant reservoir, it goes out of the bottom bung, down through the little hole here. You can see it in the VMP videos for the heat exchanger video. It goes down underneath the heat exchanger, up into my the coolant pump, and then out of the coolant pump, through the heat exchanger, back up into the top port of the supercharger, goes through there, and then comes out the bottom port of the supercharger into the reservoir. And there's a couple reasons I did this. So VMP themselves recommend that you bring the coldest fluid into the top of the intercooler on the supercharger, because you want the compressed air to interact with the coldest part of the intercooler, the coldest water, last. So as you're compressing air up, you want it to interface with the coldest water last, so you put the coldest water in at the top, if that makes sense. So you have the pump, and it's pushing coolant through the heat exchanger, so it's freshly cooled down by the heat exchanger, straight into the top of the supercharger, does its thing in there, and then comes out into the top of the reservoir. And the reason it's in the top of the reservoir is because you want to pull from the bottom. I always want my pump to be pulling from the bottom of the reservoir, so it does not starve. If I was pulling from the top of the reservoir, and if I went around the corner, or if I accelerated really hard and all this water sloshed to the back, then now it's pulling air, and I'm going to have air in my system, and that's not fun. I did actually drive this around into town once or twice without this coolant system actually working, because I didn't realize, especially since my from the reservoir to the pump, it actually goes down below the level of the pump and then back up into it, which technically isn't great, but it's how I had to run it. You have to burp the pump for it to start moving coolant around, and all you really have to do for that is you turn your key on, the pump starts pumping, and you just pull the outlet tube on the pump, and you just crack it to air or to atmosphere, the pump will burp a little bit and it'll start shooting coolant out, and you shove the tube back on it and you're good to go. You're going to get some coolant on you, but it burps the system. It'll push the rest of the air out as it makes its way back to the reservoir, and you're good to go. And as for wiring, the wiring on the pump and the wiring on the heat exchanger are all one wiring harness. It runs down, pretty much comes by, plugs into both fans on the back of the heat exchanger, and then goes to your pump and plugs into your pump. And then the other way it comes up, it ties into a positive prong on the fuse box, and I believe it grounds on a negative down here. And then it routes down behind the blower to, I believe it's your power wire for your radio. It literally tees in line to the power plug for your radio. It's on the back of your passenger side valve cover, and it plugs in, and everything's good there. There are some relays that are housed underneath the bumper, underneath your passenger side headlight. One's for your fans, and one's for your fans, and one is for your pump. And so that was all ran clean. And yeah, that's pretty much the coolant system. There's not much to really do there. Like I said, I'm running about 20 degrees over ambient. That's with everything up to temperature, everything heat soaked. Going down the highway, cruising in the town, it really doesn't matter. I'm about 20 degrees over ambient. So if it's 70 degrees out, it's 90 degrees intake air temp. And I've found that it usually likes around 100 degrees intake air temp, just in general. It kind of lingers around that temperature level. On the induction front, there wasn't much. Well, we'll just get into it. This is the Air-Aid cold air intake kit. This was what I was running when I was a full bolt-on car, and it works fine with this system. The thing about this supercharger is it does take your throttle body and shift it over to the driver's side just a little bit, but I know that the JLT2 cold air intake works, and now I know that the Air-Aid cold air intake works. The only thing that you're gonna have to account for is that somewhere in your piping here, you're gonna have to shorten it by probably 2 inches or so, because you're gonna have to account for the throttle body being shifted over. And that's about it. The throttle body doesn't really come towards the front of the car much, so you don't really have to worry about it overshooting and really hood clearance issues. But I just have I have a regular hose coupler here, and the regular hose coupler here, and between those two and the worm clamps and just kind of playing around with it a little bit, you can get it to work. And there's not, I would venture to say that probably most 11 through 14 intakes will probably work with this setup with some minor modification. And yeah, so physically it works. We'll just go down the line here. So the MAF sensor will need a splitter harness that you can get from VMP, and that's how you get your intake air temp 2 reading. And so what it does is it tees in to the wire harness that goes to your MAF sensor, and it literally just tees in line. So you have from your car the wire harness, and you plug in the T, and then you plug one of that T back into your MAF just like normal, and the other end is like a 3-foot long lead, and I ran it up pretty much alongside my stock wire harness on the top of the valve cover behind the back of the head unit, and it plugs into that intake air temperature sensor that you tapped earlier. And so that pretty much negates the temperature that your MAF reads here and plugs in the temperature that your sensor is reading when the air is boosted. Because as a tuner, you only care about the air temperature that's going into your intake, which in this case is the air that's compressed and is pretty much in that cavity, ready to go in your intake. So that's the temperature you want to know. Um, so buy that harness or get it in the swap kit and plug it in, and you're good to go. You could tap a port for your bypass valve to dump air or to read the vacuum in your intake tube. Some intakes already have a port for this or a port that you can use. Mine did not, primarily because I threw away the fitting that I believe they use for automatic transmissions, some vacuum reference for that. But this is a manual car, so I didn't need that port, so I threw it away. Regardless, you can pretty much just tap and thread in just a regular barb fitting that you can find at a hardware store, and then run a vacuum line from before your throttle body to the bottom port on the bypass valve, and that then you should be good for that part of the bypass valve. We might as well talk about it while we're here. The top port on the bypass valve goes to a little nipple on the passenger side, right behind the PCV valve port. It's kind of hard to see unless you're looking right in there, but that's really the vacuum port that matters for the bypass valve, because that's the one in the chamber that's really telling everything or indicating whether you're wanting to go boost it or not, if that made any sense. Like I said, some guys are running the bottom port to atmosphere, so regardless, the top port on the bypass valve has to go to the little nipple on the supercharger behind the passenger side PCV valve. The bottom one can either go and reference your intake tube like I have here, or allegedly, you can run into atmosphere. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard. Moving on, moving down the intake tract, you will probably need to run VMP's little adapter plate, because the intake hole on the supercharger is like 110 millimeters, and the intake hole on the stock throttle body is like 80 millimeters. So you need to adapt down, and you need to adapt the bolt pattern down from the supercharger to the stock throttle body. So VMP makes a really nice billet plate that just sandwiches, or that adapts the two together, and has gaskets on both sides, and it works really great. The reason you have to go to a stock throttle body is that at this time, the electronics from the GT500 throttle body do not play well with the 11 through 14, or really any of the Coyote throttle body wiring harnesses. They're two different, I believe one is analog and one is digital. The electronics don't play together, and there's no adapter currently for us to run the GT500 throttle body. So you pretty much have to run a stock throttle body, which means you have to run the adapter plate. Slightly behind the throttle body, there is the first map port, or map sensor port, which we're not speed density based. We don't need map sensors. So VMP also makes a little plug kit, sits right there, and it just plugs the little sensor port, and you screw in a little screw and you're good to go. Also, you technically don't need to, I believe. You can probably make the stock wire harness for the throttle body reach the throttle body, but I wasn't a fan of it because it was a little too tight for my liking. So you can buy a little 6-inch throttle body wire harness extender from VMP, and it works great, and it gives you plenty of slack. I don't have to worry about any stress on the wire harness, nothing like that, and it works perfectly. We'll kind of sidestep into all the vacuum ports, because that was a question that I had when I was building this, and that's a question I've seen a couple times. So we've already covered the bypass valve, but real quick, the top port on the bypass valve goes to the nipple on the supercharger, right behind the passenger side PCV port. It's kind of tucked up underneath there, but if you look, you'll be able to see it. And the bottom port on the bypass valve can either go to atmosphere, or you can reference some part in your intake tube before the throttle body after the MAF sensor. That's the bypass valve routing. Kind of working our way around the front. Obviously, you have the coolant lines. You also have your PCV intake there as well on the passenger side. And so I'm running a catch can. I'm running a UPR catch can. So this PCV valve will it's supposed to pull from your passenger side valve cover. So passenger side valve cover to the PCV port on the passenger side. And then moving down now to the driver's side, you have two ports. You have another one that looks like a PCV port. That one, I believe, stock is it's supposed to be for your brake booster, so that when you're like idling around town or just anywhere in vacuum, it'll pull vacuum and help your brake booster. It'll assist your brake booster. So that big port is for your brake booster. There's a smaller diameter, really long, skinny port right behind it. That one, I believe, is for your purge valve stock. That's what those are meant to be. I have those switched around. So the big one is routed to my purge valve, which is right behind my coolant reservoir, and the small one is routed to my brake booster. And really, the only reason I did that was that the line sizes fit better. So I just did some coolant lines that fit over the purge valve, and the size coolant line that fit over the purge valve also matched pretty much the size of the big port, and then vice versa. So the little brake booster line coming off of my brake booster was more like the size of the purge valve port on the supercharger. So I just swapped them around. I haven't noticed any adverse effects either with braking, with like not having full braking pressure, and I haven't noticed any adverse like gas tank activities to where like to indicate that the purge valve wasn't working either. And so, because they're pretty much just both vacuum references post throttle body, so there shouldn't be much of an issue there. So yeah, that should be all of the vacuum ports and where they go. It is worth noting with my purge valve, as with a lot of them, stock, they sit right next to the throttle body, so the wiring harness isn't very long for them. VMP also makes a wire harness extender. I believe they make it's a 3 foot and a 1 foot, or it's a 3 foot and a 6 foot. They make two wire harness extenders for the purge valve. I bought the 3 foot one, and I pretty much plugged it right in where it ends at the stock wire harness, wrapped it up, and then ran it back with my wire harness, the stock wire harness, and then plugged it back in to my purge valve where it is behind my coolant reservoir, and I've had no issue. Also, on the topic of coolant, not for the supercharger coolant, but for the car coolant, another kind of like hit or miss topic is the water necks, the black little water necks that come out of the front of the engine block for the heater hoses that go across your fuel rails. I was kind of on the edge of what to do about these because, first of all, the driver's side hit completely. It hits the gearbox on the throttle body normally, and the passenger side one, while it doesn't hit anything, it's kind of down in there low enough to where the 90 degree on the heater hose is not long enough to click on it, because it kind of has to reach down in there. So what I ended up doing was I left the pipe on the passenger side the same. I didn't touch it. The driver's side, I pulled and I put it in my bench vise, and I heated it up right where I wanted to bend it, and I bent it pretty much, if you're looking at the engine bay, I bent it 90 degrees right, a quarter of an inch, half of an inch, just enough for it to clear the throttle body, and put it back in. I sanded it down and repainted it and put it back in, and it's worked great so far. Make sure you pull the O-ring before you heat it up. Um, and yeah, so that's how the tubes. That's how I have these coolant tubes addressed. Um, Also, with doing this, because I believe the fuel rails are higher, and then you have to reach around the head unit. The stock coolant tubes themselves didn't appear to be long enough to comfortably reach the black tubes, so I extended both sides. You can go to the auto parts store. They make little 3/4 inch or 5/8 inch heater hose extenders. They're just plastic. They're literally just like butt connectors. So you can connect one 5/8 heater hose to another 5/8 heater hose. And then I bought 3/4 and 5/8 heater hose and extended them forward. And then you can also buy the 90-degree connectors as well. So it is worth noting, at least on this car, on these years, I believe 11 through 14, they should all be the same. Your passenger side is a 3/4 inch hose. Your driver's side is a 5/8 inch hose. I did end up using a 3/4 inch circuit from the extension forward on the driver's side, and I haven't had any issues yet. But it's it's worth noting. And yeah, so I just cut the stock heater hoses pretty much halfway down. I cut them at the halfway mark and then extended them forward. And then since I have them extended, I could make them as long as I wanted, and they reach down comfortably, and they work great now. So that was a kind of a creative fix, but they sit comfortably now, and I'm pretty happy with where they're at. Also, related, I bought, because apparently you can't find them anywhere in person, at least where I'm at. You can buy constant tension clamps from, I believe it's clipsandfasteners.com. I believe they're 25 millimeter clamps. And I bought 2 packs. I have 10 of them. Those are the clamps that I use to extend the heater hoses, and then I used them on the top part of the actual coolant system for the supercharger, and they're black and they look great, and they clamp really hard. They're really nice, high quality clamps. I believe they were like $30 or something. I kind of coughed when I bought them, but they're worth it. They're really nice clamps. I can't praise them enough. I never thought I'd be praising clamps, but I love them. Fueling is pretty straightforward, as with pretty much every power adder with these cars. I'm running a VMP booster pump in the trunk, and this supercharger came with the fuel rails and the injectors, and that's pretty much all there is to it. When I got the supercharger, I did send off the injectors and the fuel rail to have them cleaned, just because I don't know where they've been, and I just wanted to have a peace of mind that they were all starting from new. By the time I had everything clean, they were pretty much the price of just having bought new ones, but whatever. I also replaced the factory fuel line. It is worth noting that the stock fuel line will work. I just was not a fan of, like, if you have an 11 through 14 car, you'll know, maybe other cars too. The last foot of the factory fuel line is a hard line, and so with the fuel port on the rail kind of sticking out at a 45 degree off the fuel rail, that would mean that you had like a foot of fuel line just sticking like 45 degrees off this side of the fuel rail in your engine bay, and it was super ugly. So I ripped out the whole stock fuel line and replaced it with Evil Energy's 6AN fuel line kit, and it looks great. I think it looks super great. And again, knock on wood, I haven't had any issues with that. On the fuel rail side, it's a 3/8 push connector fitting. I'm using just one of their little bent AN connectors for that, and then the push connector. And I ran it down stock line, or stock routing all the way back, and then the back side of it on the fuel hat, it's a 5/16 push connector fitting. which Evil Energy also sells. And it needs to be a 5/16 90-degree push connector fitting. And you need to shave down the little like blue little clips that retain the fitting, because the nipple on the fuel hat is not long enough for it to push down all the way. So you need to kind of shave off the end, and then it'll push down, and you'll be good to go. While I'm thinking about it, we can also talk about the purge valve. Like I said before, it's mounted behind my coolant reservoir. I just 3D printed a custom bracket and mounted the coolant reservoir on the front, and then I couldn't find a place to put the purge valve, so I figured I'd put it behind there. And it ended up working out pretty well. Like I said, the wire harness itself runs really neatly. Just I ran it straight back to the firewall, and then it kind of loops back with the purge valve line, and I kind of tied it underneath and made it look clean, and it plugs in there. And then I'm running both from the fuel tank and to the intake lines behind the head unit. And how I did that is because like factory, from the fuel tank to the purge valve, it's a plastic hard line. And so I pretty much threw that in the trash. You can use, I believe it's 3/8 heater hose. It's not fun to get it down, to connect it down on where it connects kind of down on the frame. But once you do it, it ain't coming off. And so you plug it in there, run it up behind your head unit, and then into your purge valve, and then run from your purge valve back behind the head unit, and then up kind of with the heater hose into the port. And I haven't had any issues with that yet. Another point of note for the fueling, if you get the stock Predator fuel rails, they will have a port on the side of them. It's right in front of the import for the fuel line, and it's for a stock fuel pressure sensor. You're either, like for me, I'm running a fuel pressure sensor, so it threads right in, no issue. But you will have to find a plug to plug that as well. I believe it's an M10 is what I've seen other guys say. It's also it's a pipe threaded, it's a pipe pitch, or an NP, excuse me, it's an MPT port. Your local hardware, oh god, your local hardware store will have the plug for it.